Earful Tower listeners, another Monday, another new episode, and this one is a little bit different. It is me talking to Berne, technically His Excellency, the Ambassador, Berne. So he's Australia's ambassador to France, and the reason it's a bit different is because, firstly, I didn't do it in the studio, I went to his residence, and secondly, it's very rare that I've done an episode from someone's apartment before, and when I say apartment, it's not really an apartment, it's more of he lives in the embassy on the top floor. So when I went there, I had to go through all the security. It was very formal. We had a tea. It was just a whole different experience. It was great. It was really fun. And we talk, as you're about to hear, we talk all about Australia. We talk about Paris. We talk about what it is to be an ambassador. We talk about all sorts of things you're about to hear. But a little bit of context. If you'd never heard of the Australian ambassador to France, let me explain a little bit about him that you're going to hear in this episode. He went very viral a few months back when he proposed to his partner right after gay marriage was made legal in Australia. And so he did it in this one-take video in the same apartment where we recorded this interview. And he just talked to the camera, said, I'm going to go propose to my partner, walked off, did it. It went viral. It went everywhere. It was at a time when everybody was celebrating this big step for Australia. The French people, everyone in Paris really loved it. It was in all the newspapers. It went around the world. And we talk a bit about that. So if you don't know what we're talking about, it could help to watch that video, maybe now, maybe after, but it'll all be on theearfultower.com. Anyway, let's not muck around. Let's get into it. Here's the ambassador. And let's get on with it.
One man, one country, one red scooter. Here's the Earful Tower with Oliver G.
Okay, I'm here. Now, first things first, we need to talk about how I address you.
Brendan is fine.
Just Brendan?
Yes, that's fine.
Because
No, Votre Excellence, none of that.
None of that? Because on the internet it said, it's His Excellency, the Ambassador.
Son Excellence.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's quite a long...
It's a long title, but you're in Australia, so this is a very... c'est décontracté, informal, sort of Aussie down, easy atmosphere.
We are in Australia right now.
Yes, technically you are.
Can you explain that to me? Because that's baffling for me. I can see the Eiffel Tower. It's about, how many meters away from the Eiffel Tower?
It's 400
400?
meters.
Okay.
Look, it's the Vienna Convention, so this is an inviolable diplomatic space, which means that this is technically regarded as Australian space.
Okay. Though we're drinking tea, looking at the Eiffel Tower.
Indeed we are. Well, drinking tea is quite Australian. Looking
That's
at the
true.
Eiffel Tower, less so, but Australians love France, so I would say it's entirely an Australian thing to do.
Fair enough. You know what? We could have had this more Australian because I planned to bring a packet of Tim Tams in for you.
They're a great Australian product.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find any.
This is something that we'd like to address with our free trade agreement.
Right? Is this one
To
of
be
the
able to
key
bring
issues?
Australian delicacies in, Vegemite, Tim Tams.
Do you ever eat that kind of stuff when you're living here?
I have so many Australian guests that come through. They
Yeah.
feel it's their obligation to pay homage with such things from Australia. To
So if
remind
I had
you of
brought
home.
you some Tim Tams, you would have had a cupboard full of 600 Tim Tams.
I get more Vegemite than Tim Tams
Right.
because I'm a Vegemite sort of...
How many grams of Vegemite have you got out the back?
Enough.
Yeah.
Enough to be able to stay inside the residence for a
Right.
good couple of weeks.
Do you actually like it though, honestly?
Yes, absolutely.
Honestly?
It's something you brought up on. If you've had it by the time you're 4 or 5, and it's a lifetime commitment.
I think a lot of I should explain for the listeners who aren't Australian, Vegemite is, what is it? It's kind of a yeasty...
It's a yeast. It was a byproduct from the beer making process, of which Australia knows quite a bit, to my knowledge, and it was seen as a very rich vitamin B source and was a very important part of the Australian diet going back at least 100 years.
So how often are you talking about Vegemite when you're doing interviews?
Very rarely.
Yeah?
In fact, I've never dropped the Vegemite word until now.
The V-bomb, right? One of the big things that I personally don't... This whole show is about figuring out France, and one of the things I don't really understand is what an ambassador is. I mean, it's first things first, are you an expat? Especially because you're kind of living in
Not
Australia.
really. Technically, no.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm on an Australian diplomatic passport, which means that I'm here for the government, working for the government, but then at the same time I am an expat because I'm a foreigner living in a broader foreign community in France.
Well, technically you're living in Australia still.
Yes, I am, but I am very integrated into the French community.
Yeah.
Most people I meet with and talk to are French people,
Yeah.
and in French.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I cover the spectrum of a I call it a Frozzy. French Aussie. I've come back after 10 years of being away, so I know France very well. I love the country, love the language, love the people.
Yeah, you speak French quite well, huh?
Well, I'd never say such a thing, but people don't get up and walk out when I'm
What
half an hour in a conversation in French, which is a good sign.
You know the scale, the one I've come up with as a scale, is if you can say du coup, like you use that in a sentence, oh, well, du coup, then if you use that, you can speak French properly. So are you dropping that?
I have started using that as a sort of, not a filler, but it means suddenly, but it also means it's an exclamatory device.
So you use it? Well, then
I do use it.
I mean, you're fluent in French. It's that simple.
I like that test, actually.
Yeah.
I remember the minute when I started using du coup.
Yeah.
And that.
What was it? What was the story?
I heard my colleague using it, and I thought that seems an odd usage of the term. And then I looked it up, and it said, "Well, no, that's actually quite acceptable." And I started to deploy that as well.
Right. I'm not there yet. I don't dare to use it. I think as soon as
Your French seemed pretty good to me when
Do you mean from the video that you saw?
Yeah, your accent was.
But that was all fake. That was the thing. I faked it. I convinced you. My French is rubbish. I sound like a cow being tortured. A cow.
This is your neighbour.
What?
And your old neighbour.
Yeah.
As a Brit.
That's
France
true. Well, honestly, I'm British Australian. Australian-British. So it's my neighbour, but it's also the other side of the world.
Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't aware of your Australian.
That's because I don't have a strong Australian accent, perhaps. But hang on, back to what we were saying. I would have thought you were like the king of the expats.
I can see how that might be seen. We have a responsibility for expats here, for Australian citizens who are here. An important part of our work is through the consular side of our work. When Australians get into trouble, when they're a victim of theft, if they injure themselves, we're the first port of call. There's tremendous comfort when Australians come to the embassy here when they're needing help. You can hear the sigh of relief. It's a bit like when they climb onto a Qantas jet and you hear the Australian accent.
Yeah.
It's
We're not sponsored by Qantas, this podcast, I should say.
It's a national carrier. But
though, if you're listening and you want to sponsor it, get in touch. So continue, Brendan.
Nice plug.
Yeah.
So Oliver, so people feel that relief, they feel the connection to the embassy. I've found many Australians outside this embassy taking photos of the embassy simply because it's a little connection to home.
And plus you've got a koala or a kangaroo on the side of the building sometimes.
We do. We have Imogen the koala, who lives just south of Sydney, who's a star on the side of the building, who was well known through the Quotidien show. We talked about the koala with Jan Barthez.
Cool. Yeah.
So that koala is very well known. In fact, we hazard a guess that most people that take their first photo of the Eiffel Tower accidentally get a shot also of our koala.
Because for the listeners at home who are trying to understand it geographically, the embassy is 400 metres away from the Eiffel Tower, but a lot of people, I assume you mean, are coming from the
They come from Bihar Kim station.
Yeah, which means you have to pass the koala.
You pass the koala, they fumble for their phone, they want their first experience captured, and invariably there's Imogen, this giant creature. Yeah. And I'm sure there are moments when Imogen looks Godzilla-like, sort of.
Right, the most famous koala.
On the side of the Eiffel Tower, depending on the angle, but she's probably the most famous koala. Because this is the most touristed place in the world.
True. You talked a bit about that you were here 10 years ago, right? Is that because you have a French partner?
No, my partner's Swiss, but I was here as a deputy ambassador to the OECD.
I haven't done my research, apparently.
That's all right. Oh. I was a deputy ambassador to the OECD. I'm an economist by training, and so I'm here now to take forward the France-Australia relationship as ambassador across the range of issues: submarine deal, free trade agreement, defending the rules-based order that France and Australia as G20 countries are so committed to doing.
Tim Tam shortage?
That's got to be part of it.
Yeah.
That's got to be a priority, I think.
I'm bigger on the Tim Tams than the Vegemite, you know?
Yeah, well, maybe we might put a picture up there next time when Imogen comes down of great Aussie culinary contributions. I mean, we're already here, the flat white.
Yeah.
The flat white.
Now this is something I
Puy de Sous.
This is, what does that mean?
It's taken, Puy de Sous, taken by storm.
Yeah, okay.
Puy de Sous, Paris, because there's flat whites everywhere.
This is something we need to talk about. I talk about flat whites I've dubbed them F-dubs for short. I'm trying to make it happen. I've interviewed a lot of coffee people on the show, and I'm always like, F-dub, you want F-dub? And it has caught on in a few of the cafes.
I like it, the W-dub, right.
Yeah.
It's quintessentially Australian. It's a pragmatic adaptation of the great immigrant contribution through the Italian community, but a very pragmatic Australian name.
Right.
It's flat and it's white.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, people know what they're getting.
I'm very aware that in this conversation that we have, that there are some things I'm not allowed to talk about. But am I allowed to talk about you recommending coffee shops? Or do you not even go to coffee shops?
Of course.
Okay.
Well, we call them cafes, of course. We think we're so sophisticated in Australia.
Coffee shops sounds like something in Amsterdam.
Having called them cafes in Australia for 40 years, and now we get here and find out the French call them coffee shops. I was mortified by that.
So do you actually go, I mean, it's still, usually when I have people on this show, they're just a regular expat, but so you don't even know if you're an expat or not. So I feel like the questions, I'm kind of even confused myself. You go outside and you go to coffee shop like a regular Joe.
Of course.
For a cup of Joe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where do
and
you
I go to O Coffee Shop, which is
yeah.
just down the road. And there's many others are in Bastille. There's one called Neighbours after the Australian show.
So you go to the Australian ones?
Yes, we've found them. And I must say, when Thomas and I go to the regions around France, we find there's always an Australian. We found an Australian coffee shop in Tours. We found several in Montpellier. So it's really it's becoming more and more established.
Taking over one flat white at a time.
I think so.
Yeah. There's a new one opening around the corner from you. Good News Coffee Shop. You heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Really
that is very good news.
Yeah.
Because that's my favourite one. Is still a good 10 minutes walk.
Oh, well,
so if I need to dash out,
there you go. Sorted. Okay. I mentioned your partner twice. You just did. We have to talk. I was going to say the elephant in the room, but you wouldn't even notice an elephant in this room. I mean, it's so big.
That's true. That's true.
But you went viral. You went viral.
Yeah.
With the video of your proposal.
Fait le buzz.
Fait le buzz. You made it the buzz.
It wasn't my intention. I mean, I had 100 Twitter followers at that point.
Is that true? Yes. And how many have you got now?
I'd been here 6 weeks. Oh, many more than that, but not as many as you might think.
Right.
But it was a euphoric time in Australia. We'd had a long road to marriage equality, and the Parliament had literally just approved the news when I had cogitated about doing something.
That's a good word, cogitated.
Yeah, just thinking about it in the background, not working it through, but just it was an inkling there, and I spoke to a couple of people in my team. I said, meet me upstairs in 10 minutes. I'm going to pop the question and let's try to share it with France to say, hey, we've joined you in approving this important social reform. And there was a lot of attention on the debate in Australia. Why has it taken so long? And the Prime Minister found a way forward, and it was a very good moment. And so to share that, what is essentially a private moment, but with my French friends and my new French partners here, was a great opportunity.
So let's talk through it. You were standing there, I think.
Right there. Yeah.
So you're pointing behind you. I want you guys at home to picture this, where there's a balcony behind His Excellency the Ambassador Brendan. Brendan is good. Do your friends call you like Brendo or something like that?
Yeah, Bernie, Breno,
okay.
Brendy. Yeah.
I won't.
My mother calls me that, but
what did your mother call you? Breno.
Brendy.
Okay.
From when I was 4.
Trendy Brendy.
I've got that as well.
So you're standing behind you. There's a balcony behind you, and you're standing there with the Eiffel Tower in the background. Good. That was a good one. That's a good. People know what's going on. And you said, "Follow me." What's going through your head then? Because I sensed that there was a little bit of nerves.
There was huge nervousness. Yeah. It was totally spontaneous.
Were you doing it live, or was it?
No, it was one shot.
Yeah, it was like the start of Goodfellas. Was it Goodfellas? Where he goes through the casino.
Yeah, right.
It felt like that.
Exactly.
Without the threat of violence.
Our fantastic colleague, who I won't name because she doesn't necessarily want to be named, but she did a great job with the camera. She just did it in one shot, and it's not something you can repeat because you're asking that question. It sort of ruins the surprise.
Yeah, imagine if she said, "Oh, the sound wasn't on at the end of it."
Sort of what to do, but it all just came together. People responded to it. It seems to strike a chord because it was It was something that I wanted to do in a sensitive way. It was important to me personally, but it was also important to share the breakthrough that Australia had and the euphoria in Australia. I mean, you saw the Parliament when it erupted in this emotion. There were people in the streets. It was something that 63% of the Australian population voted in favour of.
What do we think about
millions,
63%?
millions.
Do we consider that to be excellent, or could it be better?
In any democratic process, you always have a variety of opinions. Any election in Australia, out of 150 electorates, 134 said yes by a majority. So that, compared to Australia's electoral history, that was off the charts successful.
Yeah.
So we apart from the Indigenous referendum in the 60s, we hadn't seen anything as emphatic as that. And it laid to rest this idea that that Australians were waiting silently to say no.
Sure.
You know, the Prime Minister picked the issue and he got it right.
Yeah.
And it was a huge endorsement of a modern, vibrant Australia. I mean, let's remember this is a continent on the other side of the world from Europe and America, which are seen as sort of seats of Western values of diversity and progressiveness. Here's Australia that's had to build a continent in a very diverse region and has done so successfully, but has maintained those values, those democratic values of respecting difference and diversity. I mean, it's a huge testament to the Australian project, in my view, and was worthy of sharing in a French community. And you saw the result.
Sure.
In a totally unexpected way.
Yeah. And what were the what do you say to the haters who maybe say, you shared a very private moment there? That kind of thing's meant to be private.
I say that was a debate about
Yeah.
our lives. I mean, the debate was a public debate about people's private lives.
Sure.
So it was a natural extension of that to say, well, here's what you voted for, and isn't this great?
Yeah.
And to that I would add, life as an ambassador is never really private. I mean, we're sitting in my lounge room, which happens to, for the most part, be my office as well.
Yeah.
I have 2 or 3 meetings a day up here with
Am I in your lounge room or office now?
both.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not like sometimes with some people you call it different things.
no, there's in fact, it goes back to your point about expats, that the world that diplomats and particularly ambassadors inhabit it's sometimes hard to name, but there's something special and particular about it. You are, as a figure, a public official and a private individual, but sometimes those lines can become blurred.
Do you have one of those cars with the diplomatic number plate?
Sure.
Those green.
Yes.
What's the rules with them? Can you park anywhere?
Well, we don't. We always.
Okay.
That's a nice question. We always adhere to the.
Okay, let's talk about the other guys then.
To the rules.
The
I
Australians.
couldn't possibly comment on my wonderful colleagues in the broader diplomatic community, but
So that's
the
a
number.
yes.
The number's interesting. So you get the number for the ranking in the embassy that you are, and then there's the number for the country based on when diplomatic relations were started. So for Australia, it's number 10.
So 10 means.
10 means Australia in the diplomatic
Okay.
protocol list.
Okay.
Of
So you can
when
look at
we-
those green number plates and figure. It's like if you know the code.
If you have a list of
Yeah.
which countries France had open diplomatic relationships with when.
Okay.
We're
I've got-
10, right? Pretty sure we're 10.
Yeah, I've got I put a question on a Facebook group. It's Aussie expats in Paris meetup group, and I said I'm going to meet Brendan. I said your full name because in case they didn't know what I was talking about.
Sure.
I said send some questions in, and one of the resounding ones that came through is when is the wedding?
Well, that's a good question. We haven't settled that yet.
Someone said are we invited as well?
Well, it depends. We've got to work that out, but we're thinking. I turned 50 in 2 years, and I don't want to drag people from the other side of the world twice.
The double
Great, thanks for
header.
coming. See you again in 3 months. If you could just fly back. So Thomas and I want to avoid that.
So you either celebrate your 50th birthday early or get married in 2 years.
Yeah, maybe try and do negotiations are going on, a
Yeah.
bit much like we'd like to have happen with the FTA. Negotiations are going on. Our people are talking, and we're going to try and work out how that could work.
Okay.
But it's going to be in the next couple of years, I think.
Okay, and we'll be here.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But we probably have to do something back in Oz as well.
You can have it right here on the balcony.
We could.
That would be amazing.
We could.
Yeah.
We could. That would be nice.
Do you have a view of the Eiffel Tower from your bedroom?
A glimpse,
Just a glimpse.
to use the Sydney real estate term.
Oh, right. So, if you hold the mirror out the window and this is the best view, I take it, from this lounge room
This
office.
is the best. So Harry Seidler, who designed this building in the 70s, built this expressly for this site. To take
This is no accident.
no
this
accident. This is not a preconceived notion. This was built for this site to maximise the enjoyment of this fantastic view.
It's not bad. I used to play basketball down there, you know.
Oh, did you?
But they don't. I think they've taken away the hoops. That
Yeah.
was one of the best basketball courts to play, and we're looking at it now because if you took a picture, the Eiffel Tower is just coming up above the backboard. It's insane.
You do take it for granted that we are next to the world's most visited
Yeah.
monument. It's a great privilege.
Speaking of this building, and we're sort of wrapping up now. This another question from the meetup group or the expat group was that there's an interesting history behind this building.
There's a few myths about this building, but
And I need you to confirm or deny the myths.
right, this was basically spare land next to the old Champ de Mars railway station, which the Australian government bought from the French in 1972. It was the McMahon government.
Good price?
It was market rate,
Okay.
is what I understand. Market rate. And I'm an economist, that was a good question to ask.
Yeah.
But I understand it was, for the time, a good market rate, fair price.
Yeah.
Construction began 1975, and then it opened in 1977.
Sure. Okay.
And it embodies that era, the confidence of Australian architecture in the 60s and 70s, the influence of modernism, brutalism. I mean, Harry Seidler is a well-known.
So what does it mean to say
Architects.
brutalism?
Brutalism is a stark functionality, I would say, over finer detail.
So it doesn't really fit in with the Paris. I mean, when you look that way, all the buildings are kind of the same when we're looking out, besides the Eiffel Tower, which is obviously different to everything.
Yes.
But then when you look at this from outside, it stands out, doesn't it?
It is. It's a stark counterpoint to the Belle Epoque finery that you see across the river in the 16th. It's perhaps more attuned to the 30s feel of Trocadero, but this is why this building is so iconic. It's so adored, and it incarnates Australia. It's open, modern, bold, and beautiful.
But what about the myths? What are the myths?
There's many myths around it.
Someone said it was haunted.
It's probably haunted by a few previous ambassadors. I did have someone say that I should bring in a priest.
To do
I don't
an
believe in any of
exorcism.
that. Yes, I don't believe in any of that.
No. What, priests or exorcisms? Neither.
Certainly not exorcisms.
Right.
Look, there have been some great figures in this building. So, Gough Whitlam lived in this apartment
Oh, really?
in the 1980s. That's not a myth. He was our ambassador to UNESCO,
Yeah,
appointed by
right.
Bob Hawke. We've had many fine Australians living in this building. It's an honour to be following in their footsteps.
Okay.
For the time I'm lucky enough to be here.
No ghosts, though?
Ghosts, I can't speak for.
Yeah.
Maybe ghosts just don't reveal themselves
You've
to
not
me,
seen
or
them?
maybe I'm just.
Do you know I once walked into a cemetery in the middle of the night, and it wasn't in Paris, it wasn't Père Lachaise, it was in Australia, and I yelled out really loudly, "If there are any ghosts listening, show yourself, I'm not afraid." Nothing.
Yeah, I think that says something.
It's just something about me, maybe.
Having worked in the OECD, I'm a sort of evidence guy. I need to
Yeah, right.
form my views based on evidence.
Mm.
So until I see a ghost.
But there was no. Someone said something about a connection to World War II or deportation
I've
train.
heard that,
Yeah.
but this has echoed down through the time I've been associated with this embassy,
Sure.
but not to my knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up on a quite easy question, I think. How long have you been in Paris?
5 months.
5 months. Okay, so this is pretty easy for you. Is there a tourist site or an activity that you haven't done yet that you want to do before you leave? Let's say you find out you've got to leave in 3 days.
I haven't done the catacombs ever.
That's, wow, okay.
That's a shameful admission.
Yeah, well, speaking of admission,
Speaking
it's
of
an
ghosts.
it's expensive to get in there. It takes a long time. So.
Well, I have heard that, but it's something I want to do. But I feel like France is my second city. I've never climbed that Sydney Harbour Bridge
Right.
from where I'm from.
Yeah. Hang on, have you climbed the Eiffel Tower?
Yes, I
Yeah,
have done
okay.
it. I have done
A lot of people save that, and it would be kind of a strange thing if you hadn't climbed it.
it. It would be very
Similar
strange. I did it a
almost.
long time ago, but
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do it again, but Haven't had the chance just yet.
Oh, before we wrap up, I've got one more question I forgot to say.
Yeah.
Did you know that there are 2 crocodiles living in the Canal Saint-Martin?
I did not know that. I hope they're Australian.
I assume they're Australian, that's why I bring it up with you. I did an episode and an old lady confessed to me that she released them in there. So, like, dead set.
I'm stunned to know this.
I need a comment from the Australian ambassador.
I hope they've registered at Smart Traveller, so that in case of a consular crisis, we can be of assistance.
Okay, great.
I hope they behave.
Well,
If they're Australian, I don't want any.
an
I don't want any trouble.
2 young Australians hanging out by the canal. I don't think they're going to be behaving. If the other Australians don't have anything to go by.
That doesn't sound like it's going to end well.
Well, thanks for your time, Brendan.
Thanks.
If you're keen for it, we could do a little walk around, a video for the Facebook followers.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on the Earful Tower, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You're listening to the Earful Tower podcast.
Well, there you have it. That was Mr. Brendan Berne. Quite an interesting guy indeed. If you've not seen his proposal video, head over to the earfultower.com where you'll be able to find it. There's also going to be a link in the show notes down below. Now, you may have noticed a few background noises in that interview. That was, well, we weren't in the studio, so you could hear when we were putting the tea glasses down. You could hear when his staff in the background were chiming in every now and again. That was the real world, guys. And I'm not in the studio now, so you're in the real world too. Hope it didn't put you off too much, but that's what happens when we're out of the studio. Anyway, as Brendan and I discussed, we did do a walk show around the apartment. That's a walk show. It's like a talk show where we're walking. Usually I do it on the streets of Paris. This time I did it in an ambassador's residence. I've put the full video up for paying subscribers on Patreon. So if you want to see a fantastic apartment, now's a very good time to sign up and support the show. That is patreon.com/the Earful Tower. Now, let's finish up with a few of the new reviews that have come in. So this first one here is from Bad Kitty without the I. So Bad Kitty, Bad KTTY. Bonjour Oliver, I absolutely love the Earful Tower. I'm learning so much. I really like that you introduce us to sites that we may never have heard about from another podcast or in a book. I'll be taking my first trip to Paris in August for my honeymoon. I can't wait to use many of the tips that I've collected from your show. Keep up the good work, 5 stars. Well, first things first, Bad KTT. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding. Thanks for the review as well. And honeymoon in Paris is a good idea. I think it was Audrey Hepburn who allegedly said Paris is always a good idea. She may as well have said for honeymoons too, because it's true. It's a romantic place. I think we should do an episode on romantic Paris sometime in the future. But enjoy your honeymoon, Bad Kitty, and thanks for the review. Next one. Great show with an exclamation mark, says HotDog100. 5 stars. I listen to the Earful Tower weekly, and sometimes to one episode several times because I can't take notes fast enough. Oliver G helps me to feel like I'm on the streets of Paris, even when I'm sadly on a different continent. Keep up the great work. Cheers. Reba Las Vegas. Wow, okay. Well, thanks for the review, HotDog100. You are taking notes. Let me give you a little tip. On Patreon, I've gathered up almost all of the best tips from people, and I made this big old document. And it's there. It's just right there for Patreon reviewers. But little hint, when we get up to, I think, $1,000, I'm going to launch a beautiful PDF of the 150 things you should do in Paris before you die. Kind of like a checklist. I've got graphic designers and illustrators working on it. It's looking lovely. HotDog 100, you should keep an eye out for that, and you won't need to jot down notes fast enough or otherwise. But thanks for the review. Last one. This one's from Chaffee Park Chick. She says, or he, could be he, always entertaining and charming, 5 stars. I discovered the Earful Tower through Lindsay Tremuta's interview of Oliver on her podcast, The New Paris. True, I was on her podcast. You guys should listen to that one after this. I listened to one of his episodes. I've been hooked ever since. I absolutely adore the Earful Tower. I've been recommending it to all my friends. Stop. Now, Chaffee Park Chick, that is what I like to hear. You guys who want to help the show, maybe don't want to sign up, or maybe don't want to leave a review, the best thing you can do is send a message to your friend. You can do it right now. I'll help you script it. Send a message to your friend and say, hey, especially if this friend loves Paris. Otherwise, maybe don't worry. Say, hey, John, if that's their name. You know how you're always talking about Paris and you love Paris? I have got the podcast for you. It's called The Earful Tower. Wordplay on the Eiffel Tower. Anyway, get into it. You're going to love it. Anyway, that's what you guys should do if you really want to help. Tell your friends. Word of mouth is how this grows. Anyway, back to Chaffey Park Chick. The topics discussed are as fascinating and diverse as the guests, and Oliver cracks me up. As an avid Francophile in the US who's married to a Frenchman from Burgundy and who once lived in Annecy, I look forward to the podcast growing to hopefully include Greater France someday. Hint, hint. Keep up the good work. Thanks for that review, Chaffey Park Chick, and let me tell you something. Breaking news, Season 4 of the Earful Tower, that I think is going to start in August, is going to include a whole lot of Greater France. I've got a huge plan, which I'm not going to reveal yet because I'm going to keep working on it first, but it's going to be unlike any podcast you've ever heard about France. Maybe unlike any podcast you've ever heard before. I got big plans, big plans, and I'm going to start revealing them very soon. Anyway, more on that soon. Stay tuned for that. But that wraps up for this week. I'm looking forward to talking to you next Monday, where we got a chat with a restaurant owner talking about whether hipsters are ruining Paris or not. And plot twist, he's something of a hipster himself. It's Guy from Café Oberkampf and Café Méricourt. Incidentally, while we're talking about Café Méricourt in Paris, that's going to be the setting for the next live show. So that's Wednesday, April 18th in the evening. I'm going to interview TV star and real estate legend Adrian Leeds, who's a past guest on this show. Tickets are going to be €10, strictly limited seats, and a few of them are already being snapped up. So I hope to see you there. Oh yeah, and the whole thing's going to be streamed live on Facebook for Patreon members. Good excuse to join on Patreon. That's how I'm funding this show. That's where I'd like to see you. Otherwise, see you next week. Monday as usual. A bientôt.